time I turn around, now you are the feel. Jesus, you said I be a picking, no. Jesus, you said your love will cover me. Every time I look around, now you are the sea. Every time I look around, now you are the feel. Abba Father, you know me, you know my name. Abba Father, yeah. You know me, you know my name. Papa, you know my name, oh. Abba Father, yeah. You know me, you know my name. Yelele, 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 yelele. Yelele, 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 yelele. Yelele, 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 yelele. Yeah, yeah. Yelele, yelele, yelele. Abba Father, you know me, you know my name.
Thank you very much, Reverend Sama over there. Thank you very much for that wonderful piece. And greetings to Homefront. It's 3 minutes after the hour of 5 p.m. in Boya. And today, as announced to you, we are in our history, our Amba history. And in this Amba history today, like I told you, we have a very special guest that will be telling the Ambazonian people what they have not heard and what they have not known. And for that reason, I want to invite all of you who are already on this program to invite as many as Ambazonians as you know, so that they can be beneficiaries and tell our story as it is. We have been deceived enough. Yes, we have been deceived enough. It is time for us to arise and let our history be known so we can know where we are coming from. 25 gun salutes to all the people of the home front, our people on home front who are taking good care and doing serious business to set our land free. We want to say 21 gun salutes to you and our civilian population back at home that is doing their best to make sure that they don't connive with La Republique. 21 gun salutes to you and to the diasporas who are actually doing everything, supporting morally, financially, educationally, and otherwise. 21 gun salutes to all of you. And of course, when I say the civilian population, I include the refugees and the internally displaced who are there not coming back because they want to make their case known and let the people in the world know that they have been displaced because of injustice and because of wickedness of just everybody that knows what to do and is just condemning, not coming out to say exactly what they're supposed to do. I condemn this, I condemn this. Meanwhile, they know exactly what to do. Go back to the books as civilized people and check out what the books are saying, and we go from there. But they are only condemning. Nevertheless, today I have with me in the studios our elder brother, a historian who has not just been reading the history of Ambazonia, but was part of it. He contributed in one way or the other in making the history positive, but it all turned out to be negative. I will crave your indulgence to allow him to, of course, he's of age, to just greet the Ambazonian people. I will go into what we have today. So get ready with your questions. He will be talking for the most of the time, and then we'll give you time to ask any question you want to ask from him. And here today in our studios of the ABC, we have Mr. Jotanga, who will be talking to us about our history. Mr. Jotanga, go ahead and just greet the people of Ambazonia and then give a pause there, because I have a document in my hands here. When I read it, it was so disturbing that I was very, very angry. I mean, very angry. When I understood and now understand what is going on, I became very angry. Anyway, my anger piped down when I knew that you were going to be talking to the people of Ambazonia. So go ahead and greet the people of Ambazonia, and let's go, starting with what we have in our hands now. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, and without any further ado, I will say I salute my people of Amazonia. Hope the Lord continues to protect you until we arrive, Boya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Did you hear the introduction? Brief, sharp, and straight. That is who Ambazonians are. Now, Mr. Jotanga, I have here a document in my hands, and it is titled How France Reinvented Colonialism of Cameroon. How France Reinvented Colonialism of Cameroon. This document is written by no other person but you. Um, can you just go ahead and then tell us very briefly, not yet in the whole nucleus, very briefly, how you came about writing this document to make the history of Cameroon real to the people of Ambazonia, the history of Ambazonia, sorry, real to the people of Ambazonia. And then I'll get back to you with some other questions. Go ahead. Now the microphone is yours.
Okay, I have a number of friends and relatives around the world. When they see when they see documents like the one that is at the origin of this paper which I wrote, they call my attention to it. They either send it to me or they give me the they give me the website where I'll go and find that document. So that's how that the original document which inspired this paper came to me. It was published by a site called Tel Afrique or something. So when I saw it, and then I started doing some more research, and then I went on to write the paper. Yeah,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You may be surprised that in talking of Cameroon, I am I am bringing in France, but nobody there's we all know that France has been heavily involved in the shaping of what is happening in Cameroon today. Right from before independence of East Cameroon, they were already there. They had been there for 40 years. So they are very, very present in the politics of Cameroon. By Cameroon, I mean whether it's
La Republic.
La République de Cameroon alone or La République plus us for the short time
Southern Cameroon.
we have
Being with
been
them.
with them. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. In this document, you say the case of Cameroon. In this document, from what I see, is that the game plan for Cameroon is not only for Cameroon as a whole, but is for all the Francophone or the French colonies in Africa before now, because from what I'm seeing, Cameroon is standing out as a chief because some of us and the French also saw that our southern Cameroons was very, very useful for their exploitation and exploration, and so Cameroon became a standard. But according to the document, you made mention that Cameroon was not a principal because when the French were writing or talking about this document, Cameroon was doing something else. Can you just expatiate on that?
Cameroon was doing something else.
Yeah, you
In
say that there was that fight. Yeah, go ahead.
in
In that,
1958,
yeah,
uh, when General de Gaulle organized a referendum to ask its its African colonies to join it in creating a Franco-African community. Instead of granting the colonies independence, he wanted them to stay together under what he called Franco-African community. He organized a referendum in most of the French uh, colonies in Africa, but curiously, they excluded Cameroon. I will come back to that. So the referendum went on, and the result was that only one country voted against the proposal, and this country was Guinea Conakry. They said no to France. They wanted total independence. And 3 days after the result of the referendum, without any pre-arrangements or anything, General de Gaulle just declared them independent. Yeah, so that's how it ended with Guinea, and the other countries, including Cameroon, remain under the aegis of uh, France. Coming back to why Cameroon didn't take part in the referendum of 1958, I suppose it was because at that time there was already a Maquisard war raging, and France thought that if they held a referendum there, first of all, it will be difficult to do that properly. But if they held it, the people of Cameroon were going to vote like the Guineans. They were going to say no to France. So they skipped that and hurriedly decided to grant Cameroon independence, but with strings attached. And 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 those strings are all spelled out in that document which I found on the internet and which is at the basis of this paper I wrote.
Thank
In
you.
French, in France, is generally called les accords de coopération. Actually,
Yeah.
uh, there were secret agreements for Cameroon to cede its soon to be acquired sovereignty. They ceded it through this instrument. They ceded it back to France. That was the purpose, and that's what France had always wanted to do, and they had that chance to do it. And that document, those accords the cooperation which is signed it which France signed with Cameroon became a template that was going to be used to to get the same results in the other African French
Countries.
colonies in Africa. Yes, it served as a template. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. From here, I see that a document it was written in French, les 11 composantes des accords postcoloniaux avec la France, and was published in, okay, you have said that, Afrique Telegraph. This document that we are now talking about was established in 1958. Where was Southern Cameroon at this time of this document? Was Southern Cameroon's, now Ambazonia, a part of this particular document?
No, we were not part of that document. Southern Cameroon was still under British rule. So we were not part of that, and that's where it intrigues one to to know that today we are equally bound by the terms of those agreements, whereas we neither participated in the negotiations that led to the drawing of those secret agreements, nor did we accept. No, do we even have the knowledge? Nor were we privy to the existence of these cooperation agreements. We weren't. So why it should be binding to us, I do not know.
Okay. Um, I'm going to read. Going to read a portion here, and then we continue. Now, there is a book you mentioned, Le Blanc S'en Vont, uh, and that when these colonial people were leaving, this man who wrote Le Blanc S'en Vont, can you tell us a little bit about what he thought about these accords, or what he said about these accords?
Well, he did not really express much about. He didn't refer to the accord, but but he left his readers with the impression that right from the very beginning they knew what they wanted to achieve, and which was uh, the the um, colonization. You can call it colonization of Southern Cameroon. That is in the end, the Southern Cameroons became a colony of a French colony. Yes, France, La République was France's colony, which it didn't really live. It didn't really grant any sovereignty to. And then this was Southern Cameroon's being annexed, as he said in his text, that the constitution, the Fumban constitution, was except in name an annexation. It was intended to annex us, so we became like a colony of France's colony. That's the relation. That's how I can describe the relations between us. So from the very beginning, they knew that that's what they wanted to achieve.
Okay, you're right. You're right here. France had originally intended to deny its African colonies outright independence. Instead, it had proposed a Franco African community, which you have just mentioned, which was overwhelmingly approved in French constitutional reform referendum of September 1958 by both French voters and those of most African uh, France African colonies. That approval meant that France African colonies were giving up their right to independence in exchange to remaining a part of the French community. Listen, that approval meant that France African colonies were giving
Hmm.
up their right to independence in exchange for remaining a part of the French community. But events turned in but events in the world at that time, and especially at the United Nations, compelled France to reverse course and to grant independence to these countries. Now, from this statement, do you think that the plan of France to keep Africans who were their colonies to remain under France and remain part of France, and the United Nations stepping in to make a change, asking France to give them independence, did France actually give them independence as per this, what you are saying here?
Yeah. In the original proposal that that the President de Gaulle made to the French people and to their African communities. They said he said, and I am translating from a book here. He said, uh, "We we should be a community of states. Uh, every state would have its own uh, government, but there will be certain areas that uh, will come under the domain, under a common domain." And he enumerated those, like the natural resources, like communication, like educational system, like um, I have mentioned two resources, haven't I? Yes, all those. The economy too would be under what he called a common domain, and knowing that France was going to be the one in charge of the common domain, we know that it was France that was going to dictate to the others what to do with all those resources, with the militaries, and with the educational system. It was France that was going to dictate that to the Franco-African community. So France wanted to keep those essential parts of the colonies. It wanted to continue to control it, even after pretending to have granted them independence. Yeah.
Thank you. We will quickly fast forward, because when I read this history of France, it's very very annoying. But let me fast forward and go to this now. According to Pierre, how do you call him, Mesmer, the last Pierre Mesmer, who was the last French commissioner to Cameroon, about to when he was about to leave the country. um, he who was waging war against the Bush war against independence. He got the French minister of overseas territories, Gaston de Fer, to undertake
On
a
the fair.
rapidly eh?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Yes, to undertake and to rapidly grant independence to Cameroon. And from the granting of the independence, we see that they handpicked somebody who was going to be answering, "Yes, sir," to them. Is that the same thing that happened to all the African colonies that France was lording over?
Of course, France always tried to get people called the new leaders of the young. They got people who shared the same views with them, who were subservient to them and would do whatever they wanted them to do. Before Ahijo was invited to become the prime minister, there was another prime minister. There was another prime minister. What's his name? Yeah. So he was dismissed. He was removed from office by this French High Commissioner and replaced by Ahijo, because they thought Ahijo fitted the bill more than the one who was there. Yeah, Jean-Marie Mbinda. Jean-Marie
Okay,
Mbinda
yeah, Jean-Marie
was
Bida.
the prime minister before Ahijo, but
Oh, wow.
he coincidentally was for total independence. So he was thinking like the people who were fighting in the bush, who were doing the Makiza War. They were for
Mhm.
total independence, but Cameroon, France was not ready to give them. So since he was the prime minister and he was going to be the first president of of an independent in quotes,
Quote.
Cameroon.
Mhm.
They said no, he doesn't fit the bill, so he was removed and replaced by Ahijo.
Wow.
Uh, the minister in France was the minister of overseas territories, uh, Gaston Defer. He took that decision on the advice of the French High Commissioner to Cameroon.
Wow. Okay. You said here that at that time, the country, that's La Republique du Cameroon, because we're actually talking the history of La Republique du Cameroon here before we cross over to Ambazonia, that La Republique du
Yeah.
Cameroon was flooded with experts from France who were working as technical assistants and advisors in all key positions in Africa, in La Republique du Cameroon. But that all
Mhm.
this, although they were called assistants, but they were the ones who were actually running the country. At one point,
Mhm.
and for a long time, the Cameroon Minister of Defense, Saudo Daudu, was not the head of the ministry. The true head of the ministry was a certain Colonel Jean Victor Blanc, while on secondment to France, from France to Cameroon, and serving as the Army Chief of Staff. Colonel Blanc also doubled as head of the French military missions to Cameroon. With this guy, man, uh, now, do we see that this scenario is still continuing? Because when a few years ago, when Biya was absent in office, it was the French ambassador who went and presided over the EMIA graduation or whatever they call it.
Mhm.
Could it be that this is
Mhm.
still the French manipulation that is still going on today in this present 21st century, that French Cameroon is claiming that they are independent?
Well, if you look at the accord de coopération, you will see that there is one of those agreements was on the military, which spells out that our military is still controlled by the French. That's the reason why they think that they can send the ambassador to go and preside over their graduation ceremony. It's simple. It's They are the ones training them. They are the ones supplying them. Even though the people of Cameroon, the Cameroon taxpayers, pay, but they are the ones supplying them and equipping them. So they still have plenty of power over those things.
There is there is a particular phrase here you made in the set negotiations that preceded the signing of the Accord de Coopération. The French authorities explained to the African leaders that in exchange for independence, the latter would have to sign a series of agreements trying to tying their respective countries to France. In a letter to Leon Mba, the vice president of Gabon, Michel Debris, the prime minister of France, reportedly stated that independence is granted on conditions that the state, once independent, undertake to respect the cooperation agreement. Uh, so, what can you tell us about this particular phrase also going on in La République du Cameroon that has deceitfully brought us into it?
Well, uh, apparently, the then Prime Minister of Gabon, Leomba, was dragging his legs. He probably didn't want to sign that agreement. So the French Prime Minister under General de Gaulle, Michel Debré, wrote a letter directly from one Prime Minister to the other and said, "Look, we will grant you independence only if you sign those agreements relinquishing," he didn't put it in those words, but that is what it amounts to, relinquishing your sovereignty over so many areas of your country. Yeah, that's what he
Okay.
was telling him. If you want to be independent, then you have to sign those agreements. And the Amba went ahead and signed them.
Okay. We are getting closer our um, to our situation. Getting closer to our situation. Um, Let me read this out here to see what is in our situation. Oh boy, this is not ethics. Okay, let me read this out to see what is in our situation. Below are the salient points of the said accord of cooperation, which constituted the instrument by which these African countries surrendered their sovereignty to France. Number one, the colonial debt paid to indemnify France for the benefit of colonization, the automatic confiscation of national foreign reserves. Three, the right of the first place to control the natural resources of these countries. Four, priority granted to French interests and enterprises in the awarding of public contracts and calls for tenders. Five, exclusive rights to supply military hardware, you have mentioned that, and to provide training to the military officers of the colonies. Six, France's right to deploy troops and intervene militarily in these countries in order to defend its French interest. Seven, the obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language of instructions in schools. Wow. The obligation to use the CFA franc as national currency. Nine, the obligation to furnish France with an annual balance sheet and statement of foreign reserves. 10, to the obligation to refrain from forming military alliances with all other countries unless authorized by France. 11, the obligation to form an alliance with France in the event of a war or global crisis, blah, 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 blah. Now, these are very, very serious agreements and very serious conditions that they kept put forth to these people. And I don't know what happened. They went ahead and signed it. Now, that is French and French Cameroon and the French colonies. Let's quickly cross the board and run over to where we are very much concerned. Let's look at some of these points more closely, especially with regard to Cameroon. It is only after reading these obnoxious accords de coopération mentioned here above that one can begin to understand General Charles de Gaulle's 1961 quip, in which he reportedly thanked the Queen of England for un petit cadeau de la reine à la France following the illegal transfer of authority over the territory of southern Cameroon from British to La Republique du Cameroon. Why did the French feel so involved in the coming together of the two supposedly African countries? But because but because they knew they stood to gain enormously, as they were still in control of one of these countries whose economic potentials and fortunes were about to be greatly enhanced by the additional territory it was taking on. So, can you go ahead and tell the Ambazonian people this particular statement? I have heard it, but I thought it was a myth. I thought it was just an invention. But seeing it in the book that General de Gaulle thanked the Queen of England for a petit cadeau of southern Cameroons, can you tell the Ambazonian people how that came about? Over to you, sir.
Well, I must confess that I tried to find that phrase. I was in Paris. I went to the government documentation center in Paris. I looked through the old newspapers of that time. I was not able to find that statement, but the statement is so well known that I don't think it just came out of thin air. It must have been said somewhere. But all the same, the French have always treated Cameroon as their home. You can see that in many ways, like the ambassador coming to preside over the graduation of the military academy. That is unheard of. American president or ambassador will not go to preside over the graduation ceremony of the French military academy. Can you imagine that happening? No, it cannot. But they can do it to us because they still consider Cameroon as their colony. Coming back to that statement, it is proof that France was happy that we were joining a territory which was still their colony, That's why I earlier called it. I earlier said Southern Cameroon was and probably still considered as the colony of a French colony.
Oh, the colony of a French colony.
Southern Cameroon, yes, was or and is still probably considered by the French as a colony of no, the colony of a French colony. France still being theoretically following those accord de cooperation which are still in force. France is therefore still the colonial master of France, and then we haven't been annexed.
Cameroon. Still the colonial
Southern
master of
Cameroon
Cameroon.
Sorry, Southern
Yeah.
Cameroons haven't been annexed as per the Federal Constitution of 1961. We being annexed, we are a colony of Cameroon, considered a
Okay.
colony of Cameroon. So we are a colony of the colony of France's colony. That's what I mean to
Okay.
say.
Oh, okay, good. Understood now. Now, this statement, it says that in addressing words of thanks to the Queen of England, the French general certainly had in mind the engagement President Amadou Ahidjo had made to surrender Cameroon's sovereignty to France. Then, in 1972, after deciding that the oil deposits and other minerals and natural resources French explorers had just discovered in the southern Cameroon's territory were worth France's interest, the French authorities ordered President Amadou Ahidjo to do away with the federation that was not even practiced, to establish its own, uh, to establish in its place a unitary state. That's why, that way, in a semblance of legitimacy and in accordance with the provisions in the above post colonial agreements, which granted France the right of first choice to claim any natural resource discovered in Cameroon, in the country, France would be able to exploit southern Cameroon's natural resources without any fear or of being challenged. So that was the politic behind the 1972 merging of Ahidjo trying to bring the two Cameroons, who at that particular time did not even have an article of cooperation or a document at the United Nations showing that we have actually joined together. Was this on plan and purpose? Where was the United Nations at this time of all this mess that was going on?
Well, that's the question I keep asking myself, and I keep on wondering why did the United Nations allow the Southern Cameroons to obtain independence by joining a country that was not independent, as per the terms of the Accord de Coopération. La République de Cameroon wasn't independent. Their sovereignty was taken back. So why did the nations think that we could become independent by joining them? So we joined them, and we were not, and we have not been independent too, because France has just simply extended its sovereignty over La République to include us. That's what happened.
Yeah, in number 7 of the article of cooperation, they actually state that the obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language of instruction in school. Could it be the reason why so many bilingual schools were automatically created in the southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, to fulfill this cooperation agreement?
Yes, that was the reason. They wanted the French language to grow and become the official language as quickly as possible. Very very early in the union, an employee, a staff of the French consulate in Boya, wrote a letter to his superiors in Yaoundé and was explaining why the process of French Fran of making France French the language of business in southern Cameroon was not yet very far gone. He said, well, these people have been speaking English for 40 years. It's not easy to just do it overnight. It will take some time. He was pleading with his bosses in Yaoundé that it's going to take some time. It will not be overnight. So that had been their goal right from the very beginning. They very much wanted it. Yeah, they were aiming at that. General de Gaulle in some other on another occasion uh, told Ahijo, he said, "Why don't you make your young Anglophone citizens learn the French language right from infancy? If you allow them to be speaking English, you always have a country divided." That's what he said.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Now, according to your document here, and so Ahijo, it happened that President Ahijo, in total disregard for Article 47 of the so-called Federal Constitution, organized a referendum to change the structure of the country from a federation to a unitary state. Of course, the results of the referendum were a foregone conclusion, as the two choices offered to voters were we and yes. I've heard this statement over and over. Is it really true that that is what they put forth to our people? A yes and a vote in a referendum, a we and a
Well,
yes.
that's all we know. I'm sure they were supposed to have yes and no, and then we and no. I'm sure they were supposed to have that, but the ballots that were available were yes and we, because they wanted everybody to vote one or the other. That happens when you rig elections. You do things like that. You remove the chances of somebody even mistakenly votes no. You remove that chance by just removing that ballot paper.
Wow.
Yeah?
Okay. Yeah. You still have something to say?
No.
Okay,
I'm
good.
listening.
Now, here, Yeah, here. And so the Southern Cameroonians found themselves bound by a post-colonial undertaking which President Amadou Ahidjo had made previously with with France, and which had not been disclosed to the people of Southern Cameroons at the time of the so-called reunification. Now, the 1972 referendum again, um, another exercise of fraud. President Hijo was calling the people to go to the polls without revealing his true intentions to them, namely that the referendum was intended to allow the resources of this former British Southern Cameroon Trust territory to come under France control. It was also intended to grant legitimacy to his plans to abolish the federal structure of government of federal structure of Cameroon and to concentrate all powers in his own hands. Now, our politicians at that time, let me ask this, it will sound like a stupid. Were they very, very privileged, or they did not actually give them the opportunity to think and do things like we are doing today? Why did they not? Does it mean that there was nobody amongst them who could differentiate between the we and the yes? That we and yes is the same thing amongst our people at that time who were going to the referendum.
Well, the when the people were going, the people didn't know. The people couldn't have known that there will be only ballot papers for we and yes. They couldn't have known before the day of the election. I'm sure it was when they got into the polling station and were ready to vote that they discovered that they couldn't find anything but yes or we. There were no or no. So they had to vote and they had to vote. So they went ahead and but they were voting grudgingly, uh, knowing that it was the wrong thing. Yeah. So they voted. As for the elites of Southern Cameroons coming together to do something, I've read from other sources that after Ahidjo made that declaration in Parliament, the ministers and the federal deputies converged at the home of late Dr. Bernard Fanlon. May he so rest in peace. They converged in his house, and they started discussing, and but they didn't go very far. I think it is reported that he said something like, "This is not your fight. It will be it will be for your children or your
Wow.
grandchildren to take up this fight." Because
Wow.
as they converged in his house, the house was shortly after people came in. The house was surrounded by security people, so they couldn't do very much. I don't know what could have happened if they tried to continue with that
The
meeting they were holding
deliberations.
in. Yeah, so they stopped and dispersed.
All right. I think I will agree very strongly now that this is really God's time, and because those people are brutish, they would have just killed all of them, and
Mhm.
as France was behind them, and Britain had gone with the wind, nobody would have actually been able to say what they are saying here. So they behave wisely, and
Mhm.
I think we should congratulate them for that. The referendum was followed by a systematic dismantling of most of the political and economic institutions existing in the territory of the former British Southern Cameroons. The parliament, including the House of Chiefs, the Public Service Commission, the West Cameroon Police Force, the Marketing Board, the Cameroon Electricity Corporation Power Cam, the Victoria and the Tico Seaports, the Public Treasury, etc. The outcome of this referendum paved the way for any distinctions between the two Cameroons to be blurred, if not removed completely. The two territories have been unified in this manner. France was now free to extend and to implement its colonial accord de coopération with la République du Cameroon, which granted France the right of control over Cameroon's natural resources to the territory of southern Cameroons. Wow. So, for a second time in just over a decade, La République du Cameroon obtained the consent of the people of southern Cameroon by way of deception and fraud. So, you have a comment to run on that because it's very clear.
Well, there's little to be said because I have said it there as it should be said. Uh,
Yeah.
that's how it happened. But France needed that federation out of its way because that allowed France to extend its French sovereignty, I would say it, over the territory, a territory that had not previously been its colony.
Colony,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were now merged with East Cameroon, and they could do whatever applied to East Cameroon would apply to us. Yeah, they will say, well, they have resources there, and we have signed an agreement about resources, so we go and get them. Yeah.
Yeah, La Republic of Cameroon was not even a French colony. It was a UN trust territory placed under French administration for approximately 40 years from the end of the First World War to the eve of 1960. And that is the same thing that happened to the Southern Cameroons. It was not
Yes.
a British colony, it was a
Mhm.
trust territory,
A trust
United
territory,
Nations
yes.
trust territory, yeah, placed under
Hmm.
the British.
Hmm.
Wow. How much did France invest in the territory, in the trust territory in the 40 years interval? Nothing can be seen that France invested in La République for the 40 years. And how much has it received as payback from Cameroon since 1960 when it ended its administration of the country? If at all it has ended. It has not even ended. If, as I imagine, France started exploiting Cameroon's natural resources as soon as it became the territory's trusteeship administrator, then it has benefited from that country's resources for a full 100 years and still
Hmm.
counting from the end
Hmm.
of World War One through 2019. Now,
Hmm.
2022, now 3 years have added. After a
Hmm.
full century of repayment, it is not yet time for the debt, whose total amount remains undisclosed, to have been paid off in full. In all fairness, is the amount Cameroon's resources forfeited by France during the past century not enough compensation for a period of colonial investment which lasted only for 40 years? Unjustified as such a burden might be for former French African colonies on account of their colonial relationships with France, it is even more unjustified to saddle the territory of southern Cameroon with such encumbrances, whereas the later was never a colony nor a trust territory to France. Now, the biggest question, which is I don't know. The other French countries, French colonies, or trust, the other French colonies, were they also trust territories or they were actually French colonies? I mean, the other African countries that speak French, were they actually trust territories or they were actually French colonies?
Most of them were French colonies. The few that were trust territories were the countries that were conquered from the Germans. That would
Mhm.
include Togo and
Uh-huh.
some other one place. Yeah, those were the ones that were trust territories, because after the Germans were defeated,
Mhm.
those territories were managed first of all by a branch of the League of Nations, which was called Custodian of Enemy Property. Yeah. So they were the ones, and the League of Nations now transferred those territories to France or to Britain, depending on proximity.
Wow. So we'll go ahead. The second of the 11 points of agreement grants France the right to automatically confiscate a substantial portion of the foreign reserves of France's former African colonies. That is why Haiti is where it is now, because of this accord with France. This means that the said countries do not have access to a large part of the proceeds of their foreign earnings. France thus controls the monetary policy of these countries. They may spend their money only in ways that France authorizes. Wow. Even if these have to no relevance to their country's respective needs. At 20% of the previous year's physical revenue, no, I've jumped. At some point, the ex-colonies could withdraw from France Central Bank only up to 20% of the previous year's physical revenue. They could go above the ceiling in their withdrawal only with approval from the French Treasury, and such withdrawals are subject to repayment of both the principal borrowed plus accrued interest. Excuse me. This was their money kept in the French treasuries. And then when they go to take it on borrow and they pay interest.
Mhm. Those were the
This is
terms,
ridiculous.
and that was the practice. And I think it is still the practice to these days, because those accord de cooperation have not been abrogated. They are still in force. I'm sorry.
I do not know. Again, I'm still asking, could it be that these accords that we are talking about now here were they known to the uh, countries that spoke French, and they went ahead and accepted these accords, or what actually went on that they accepted the accords without finding out uh, whether this was what they were supposed to do.
Mm. Remember, there are so many circumstances that made that easy to achieve. First of all, France had put at the head of all their colonies people who were friendly to France. I said they removed
Mm,
Mbida, Jean-Marie
yeah,
Mbida, who
yeah,
was for total independence, and
right,
they
right.
put Ahijo. They put Ahijo, who was friendly, who was subservient to the French. So, uh, for those who were reluctant to sign the agreement, they did some arm twisting. They said, "Look,
Interesting.
if you don't sign these documents, we don't grant you independence. You remain our colony." Yeah, and so they grudgingly, I am sure I wasn't there with them, grudgingly signed those papers. But their people didn't know. The citizens of those countries didn't know that that was the kind of commitment their government, their representatives were taking. They didn't know. They just knew that they were going to be independent, and they were happy with that. So
Wow, wow. This is very terrible. This is terrible. Ah, boy. Okay, nobody knows what is done with the rest of the foreign earnings of these African countries, which have continued to accumulate in the bank of France since independence. Some estimate Some estimate put them at more than $500 billion. Will they ever be able to repay to these countries? When? France has retained effective control over the African countries since they became independent in the early 1960s. La République du Cameroon, as evidenced by the said Franco-African Compendium of Agreement, was bereft of its sovereignty from the very beginning. So, how did the United Nations propose that Southern Cameroon achieve its independence by joining La République de Cameroon, which, similarly to all interests and purposes as per the terms of this engagement with France, was not even itself a sovereign nation? Has that question been answered?
I don't know who is ever going to ask us that a question. It's the people at the United Nations who ought to come up with an answer. Did they not know that France, no, that La République du Cameroon was not technically a sovereign state? Did they not know that that it was not independent? uh, because everything of theirs was controlled by France. Is that how other countries are independent? But they still went ahead and asked the Southern Cameroonians to go and achieve independence by joining a state that was not independent in the first place. That's it. That is illogical.
Wow, wow. I think the United Nations, I'm sure that some of the people who played this game are still alive today, and they have kept very quiet. I think the Queen of England was actually the lady who, she's not dead yet, right? The one who handed over Ambazonia, Southern Cameroons to France, according to Le Petit Cadeau. Am I correct?
Well, but if you know the British system even a little, you would know that the the monarch does not participate in government decisions. The monarch is just a figurehead. So the queen would not be directly implicated in whatever thing that transpired between France and Britain. It will be the government, and especially the head of the French government, of the British government, not the Queen.
Wow. Well, the United Nations, I do not know. Um, it's very strange that with these accords that France gave to its uh, colonial colonies and also implicated the trust territory from the UN with this kind of accord, and the UN accepted and then enshrined in their books. May I ask you whether attending independence in 1st of October 1961 by joining uh, French Cameroon is actually in the books of the United Nations? Is it there?
I was a child. I was a child then, but I think I saw posters. I may have accompanied my mother because my mother went to vote. I might have seen posters where there were things like, "Do you want to join Nigeria?" Uh, no, do you want to become independent by joining Nigeria or by joining La République? That's it. Yeah. So in that context, but we didn't know about these underlying agreements which France had signed with its colony, which denied those colonies any chance of having sovereignty. The United Nations may have known that. I am sure they did know that, but but they overlooked that, and we are suffering the consequences now.
Wow. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We will take some few more minutes and then round up here for another program to come in. From the document I'm reading here, it says that if that had been a ploy to liberate La République du Cameroon from France's strange stranglehold, it would have been hailed as clever, especially, I mean, the joining the independence by joining La République would have been held as clever, especially if it succeeded in the endeavor. But it did not. It failed woefully, and it resulted in Southern Cameroons being sucked into France's grip of neocolonialism, in which the resources from Southern Cameroon's territory have been used to pay France's imaginary decolonization debt. The Southern Cameroons owe no debt to France. They were never a French colony, not even a trust territory under the French administration. Given that the former British Southern Cameroon's territory accounts for more than 62% of the Cameroon's annual gross national product, and given also that the former British Southern Cameroon has no separate treasury of its own, is there any doubt that resources from the territory of Southern Cameroons have been used to pay for the decolonization penalty, whereas the Southern Cameroons were not at any time a history in history a colony of France? Yeah, logically, that is true. Were the UN and Queen's government in London too who delivered the Southern Cameroons to France via La République du Cameroon not aware of the existence of such an odious arrangement between France and its former dependencies? Or were they part of what we may now call the conspiracy to defraud the unsuspecting people of Southern Cameroons? That is what it should be. If they were not a part of that at all, then they too were fooled by this conspiracy against the African peoples. For it is hard to imagine how the world body could knowingly have transferred the peoples of Southern Cameroons who were seeking independence and sovereignty that goes with it to another people who were themselves no more independent and no more sovereign than the peoples of Southern Cameroon, as has just been demonstrated here. When a country is as in combat like La Republic of Cameroon in 1961, and 1961 was in 1961, and as it still is today, it is not a sovereign state, and it should not be allowed to extend such incumbents to other people. The people of Southern Cameroons were aspiring to political and economic independence, not to recolonization by another colonial master. Now, I see here a case of non-disclosure. That's the appendix. That's what I mean. You put in terms. I see here the case of non-disclosure. Are you by then saying that because of the non-disclosure of the state of La République du Cameroon, we were brought into La République du Cameroon to suffer their on decolonization too?
Yes, during the Fumba negotiations, before or after, I have not found anywhere where it is said that Ahijo or his representative told our people that, look, we are coming to join with you like this. We have lien, is a legal term. We have lien on our property by France. France has the right to sovereignty over our property. So you are coming to join
Mhm.
us. That's how it's going to be. No, I don't think there was any such thing like that. They just kept that that part, that condition, those conditions secret until after the deal was done.
Wow. Um, I want to let uh, ambassadors, we are listening to the demise. I'm calling it the demise. We are listening to a profound, uh, terrible inversion of our, not only of our privacy, but a terrible invasion of our country by La Republique du Cameroon. And from the horse's mouth here, as he has discovered by reading and also had witnessed part of it, it is said that was territory of British Southern Cameroon on one hand and French Cameroon on another hand were discussing the terms of agreement for the future for their future union. French Cameroon failed to disclose to the Southern Cameroonians that French Cameroon was on in combat property, as evidenced by the aforementioned Accord de Coopération between France and La Republic of Cameroon. So no Southern Cameroonian in their right frame of mind would have continued with this arrangement upon learning of this colossal encumbrance that the other country was likely to bring along to the new union. So the French Cameroonians withheld this important disclosure. They lied by omission. They lied. But as but an even bigger lie was the Ahidjo 1961 Federation Constitution, which Pierre Mesmer would later describe in his book as a falsely federal constitution carefully prepared by his Ahidjo, the French jurists, for the Ahidjo's French jurists. He went on to say that John Good Foncha, in a weak position, accepted the said constitution without discussing what it was, except appearance and annexation. Mesmer ended this chapter in his book by telling the joke that was making the rounds in Douala and Yaoundé at that time of going into force for of a new constitution. Reunification. Cameroon is a country bilingual in French. Can you explain that?
Yeah, the French the French citizens who were in Cameroon were very happy to make that turn that into a joke, because they knew that that was their objective. Their objective was to assimilate us, get into our territory and assimilate us. So they said the new union, the new unified country, is uh, is bilingual, is
French.
federal, is bilingual in French. Yes, yeah. I have never heard that kind of expression before. Is bilingual in French. So,
Yeah, that means
which meant that it was soon going to be only French being spoken in the overall territory. So that was their intent, and that was what they have been working towards. Mhm.
wow. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you can now see that all that we thought that were just speculations and just suspicions is coming out in history very, very clear that these people from time immemorial had planted lies to be their breakfast, supper, breakfast, dinner, what do you call it? Breakfast, lunch, and supper or dinner. They have been living on it. So all along, French Cameroon knew that very, they were lying to unsuspected Southern Cameroonians. The latter should have known better. How would they have known? Southern Cameroonians would not have known because most of these articles and these things were not disclosed to them. It is up to the legal minds amongst our leaders now, and I am surely not one of them, to tell us, does the non-disclosure of such an important issue as the Accord de Coopération not constitute a ground for the annulment or dissolution of whatever union agreement the two countries had made? Remember, it was only an informal union anyway, since no union treaty was ever signed by the parties. involved, ratified nor ratified by the respective legislative bodies of the two countries. That's true. By presenting the Southern Cameroonians with the so-called two alternatives of 1961 plebiscite, the world body was promising independence to the people of Southern Cameroons, but I am sorry to say they failed to deliver on that promise. The conditions laid down in France's so-called Accord de Coopération were most certainly intended to deprive the targeted African countries of any chance of achieving economic and political progress outside what France wants them to achieve. And that is true. That way, they would be independent and sovereign only in name, and the world remain an appendage to the French Empire. France was thus reinventing colonialism in order to perpetuate its hold on Africa. According to another clause in the lopsided agreement, French interests and French companies have priority in the award of public contracts in Cameroon. The country saw this happen in the 1990s with the choosing of Bolloré as the winner of the bid to no as wait as the winner of the bid to lease or buy the railway corporation Regificam, and go figure how that happened. When the first evaluation of the offer from 5 bidders was done, the French investor Bolloré came number 3 position. The bidder who was placed number 1 in the set first evaluation was Canadian company, which was at the time of the bidding providing technical assistance to the railway corporation under the previous agreements. After that first evaluation, Akame Mfume Edouard, the then Minister of Finance and Economy, took the unusual steps of saying publicly something to the effect that if the French company was even in the second position, then in the evaluation, they will know how to manipulate. But Cameroon would take into consideration its long-standing relationship with France and award the lease to the French company. Shortly after that statement was made, the Evaluation Commission, at the behest of the Honorable Minister, proceeded to carry out a second evaluation of the 5 offers. This time around, the outcome was different, and voila, the Bolloré enterprises were declared the winners. The long-standing relationship the minister was referring to here has its origin in General de Gaulle's series of agreements with Cameroon. A similar thing happened when the Garoua-based Société de Développement du Coton, Coton, was being privatized. Elites of the 3 northern provinces of Cameroon put together their resources and formed a holding company to acquire and run the textile company. Coton, that was about to be privatized. The Prime Minister, Simon Achidi Achu, authorized the sales of the company to the indigents of the said northern provinces of the country. But to the utmost surprise of many, his Minister of Finance at that time and Economy, Justin Dioro, promptly canceled the Prime Minister's decision and instead approved the selling of the textile company to the Compagnie Française du Développement du Textile, CFDT, a French concern. Again, it can be seen here that all that was happening in order to uphold promote the interests of France and those of French enterprises, not those of the host country, Cameroon. In the month of December 2019, just recently, Monsieur Jean-Yves Le Drian, France Minister for European and External Relations, traveled to Douala, Cameroon, to inaugurate the recently constructed second bridge over the Wuri River. The said bridge was actually built by Chinese contractors not the French. But why did he come? So you should be asking yourself why a French government official would be interested in a bridge in Cameroon that was not even built by a French company. It happened that during the bidding phase in the process of to select a contractor for the job, the Chinese made the lowest offer, but still against the dictates of common sense, Satom, a French company whose offer was far being from being the lowest, won the contract. Coopération Française uh, oblige again. And the French company quickly turned around and subcontracted out this job to the Chinese company whose offer had been the lowest. By so doing, the French just walked away with the difference between what the government of Cameroon had agreed to pay them for the bridge and the amount of the more competitive of offer to the Chinese had been made earlier. Can you imagine that? This is very clear. To explain what had happened there, we have to go back to the terms of the above mentioned post-colonial agreement which Ahidjo had signed with France, granting French enterprises precedence in award of all public contracts in Cameroon. Under those terms, the said contract could have been awarded only to the French company, no matter how low the offer made by any other bidder, non-French bidder will not have been accepted. So the French minister's presence at the official opening of the bridge in Douala was most certainly not unconnected with the fact that the project was financed at least in part by France. But do not be fooled. The French did not and do not throw money away around like that for free. It must probably involve the granting of a loan by France, a loan keeping for the past 60 years as foreign reserves, but which is often turned out to be ainsi va la coopération francophone camerounaise. So with this, sir, I would like you to run a comment on this. I will call it quit for today. We shall continue with this document to let the Ambazonian people know what happened, because I see some documents here, some things here in 1967, something happened, but then we don't run over to that. Can you just comment on this, the bridge, the Sotokoton, and the railway station that people came in and was handed over to France? Over to you, sir. And that.
Yeah, I will just make one short statement. I have somebody who had worked in the government, both the government and the private sector in Cameroon, and he made me know that when it comes to contracts like that, the minister will come in when the committee is sitting to to decide who wins the bid. The minister or his representative will come in and say, whatever you do, let the French win. That's
Wow.
all he needs to say. Whatever you do, let the French win. And they are going to do whatever it takes for the French to win, because it has to be in accordance with the terms of the agreement, which were made in the 50s and early 60s. Yeah, those terms still remain in force today, and they have to be respected.
That is
So
serious. Those terms.
yeah, so that's what happened in those three cases. They look at the terms and say, okay, against our will, we are going to do it, and they do it.
Wow. What advice are you giving to
Mm.
Ambazonians now that there was a statement made by Dr. no, what was his name again? The Banso man, you mentioned his name in Yaoundé after
Wiba,
that
Wiba,
meeting.
Wiba,
No, 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 no. The man who said
Fonlon,
that
Fonlon,
Fallon,
Fonlon,
Dr. Fallon, yes,
Dr.
yes,
Fonlon.
Dr. Fallon, yeah, yes, that our children or grandchildren were going to fight this battle and not them. What do you say of what is happening today concerning that particular statement?
Well, it sounds like it's a prediction, and that
Yeah,
is actually what is happening now. It is not those people who were at the helm of power at that time who are now fighting. They are too old to go to fight, but it's either their children or their children's children who are now in the bush fighting and dying. Yeah, and that's what Dr. Fallon predicted.
wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sure you have all heard the story of our quest for our freedom. It's not only a thing that just came in yesterday. Uh, our lines have been open since. If anybody has anything to say, either you call or you just send it to us here on Facebook, I mean, on the comments here, and then we will call it quit for today. And we are looking forward to having our historian, Jot, uh, Jotanga, to come back and let us know exactly where we are. So, what is presently going on is not just a coincidence, it's something that was actually forecasted and spoken by Dr. Fallon. And if you go back to look at it, you see that actually his children's children are the ones that are fighting this battle, meaning that we will come to age. The next thing that happens is that we will free ourselves from La Republique. And this is the year. We have gone for 5 years, and this 5 years is very significant with our fight against what La Republique has been doing to us. And definitely, we are out and we must go. The international community that we thought that claiming to be civilized, they will go by what is called truth, are still sitting in a conspiracy of silence as a result of the bribery and the cunning craftiness of France that is still trying to lord over the African countries in this 21st century. But the noise, whether taught or whether they know the history or not, the Francophone African countries are getting up as if they are rising up from sleep, and there is a war across their nations against the French. It was Mali, it was other ones, and today it is no other person but Senegal just got up a few days ago and they have started. I just wish that many African countries who are francophones, unfortunately, we are speaking a language where many of them don't even understand. But I pray that the world being a global village and many people from different worlds have now studied English, that some concerned francophone countries who speak English will hear this, especially the 11 points agenda of their cooperation with their different countries, and will take a step to make sure that they do not, for any reason, allow these frogs to continue in their land. Uh, we all know that there is no land that is yours that invaders will come in and take, that you just get up and sleep on your bed and take up that land. No, there is no land. You must fight for it. And if you are going to fight for it, then get ready. The time is now. Fallon told us in southern Cameroons, we have resurrected to it and we are at it, and definitely we have won. So, Mr. Tanga, we want to thank you very much for this piece of history. I've noted where we've stopped. The next time we have an opportunity, we will continue so that the people of Ambazonia former British Southern Cameroons will understand that this is not just a coincidence that they got up to fight, even though they didn't know this history, but God, who created them, had spoken in a way that is mysterious, that without knowingly or unknowingly, they jump into the battle. And we are definitely winning the battle. Can you just say goodbye to the people of Ambazonia, and we'll call it quit for today? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank the people of Amazonia for coming here to listen to us discuss this issue. I hope we will have many more occasions to examine other areas of our relationship with our neighbors to the right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We shall have another opportunity to examine other issues concerning our brothers to the right. Well, it has been a wonderful time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to wish you a happy beginning of the week, and we believe that as the days roll by, that's how we are gradually getting into our country, Ambazonia. Remember, we had gotten into it since 2017 when it was restored in the spirit. Now we are getting into it, getting ready to get into it in the physical, and definitely we'll go into it in the physical. Once again, thank you very much, and God bless. See you when we come in for the next episode on our history by Jotanga. God bless you.
yelele, yelele, oh, oh, Abba Father, you know me, you know my name.
Make light of the effect of those dark years on the African continent, but reason with me. If you spend too much time complaining about how you were enslaved in the past, you may actually be blinded to the modern ways in which you are still being enslaved. For instance, how slavery of the past was physical, but now it's mental. Like how I can make you think that your country is...
Well, once again, greetings to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to ABC. You've just listened to our history, Ambazonian history, and it's over. We will be getting into